and we have a guest on the show today. This is a personal honor for all of us. This is the first presidential candidate we've been able to interview, and we're honored that he decided to come and spend some time with us on the show. Evan McMullin, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
All right. Now, let's kick this off. Let's start it at the beginning. I'm going to ask you to clear the air from some people, because there's a lot of people who have suggested, that you're running to help Hillary Clinton or to set up a further political future for yourself. So tell everybody, why are you running for president?
Look, it's very simple. I'm running for president because I think both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are terrible options for leadership for this country. I think the American people know it. Millions of other Americans like me believe that we need something better. And I had hoped that somebody else would get into this race and that I could support them. Originally, I thought that's what would happen. But after the conventions, when I reached out to those who I knew were looking for someone in hopes that they would be able to tell me that they found that person, unfortunately, they informed me that they had not, and they asked me to consider doing it myself. So that's what I've decided to do. Obviously, it's not ideal because it's a 3-month presidential campaign. Our opportunity for success is far more difficult than it would be otherwise. But I thought it was so important that somebody stand up, especially on the conservative side, and oppose the kind of racist, bigoted, misogynist rhetoric of Donald Trump, and offer just a better option for the American people.
I think he has my vote already. Just hearing that he doesn't like Trump working.
You have my vote for sure.
Yeah, right. Good.
Okay, so as you said, it was a 3-month campaign. That being said, you didn't declare or even announce that you were entering the presidential race until August 8th. This was after all the RNC had already taken place here in Cleveland. So was this done purposely as like a different type of strategy, or was there some type of tipping point where one or both of Clinton or Trump had did or said something that made you realize that you needed to provide the American people with a better option?
Well, I think if there was a tipping point, it was the conventions, and that they both officially nominated Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I mean, look, this is the United States of America. We used to have great leaders in this country. And, they weren't perfect. There's no doubt about that. And we aren't perfect as a country. But we are better than this. There are better people to lead this country than the two of those. And when they were both officially nominated, I thought somehow at the convention, at least on the Republican side, something would happen so that Donald Trump wouldn't be the nominee. I know there were people there, delegates who wanted to make it happen. Unfortunately, they weren't able to. And so that was probably the tipping point. But really, this has developed over time as I saw Donald Trump gain traction in the primaries and people wouldn't stand up to him. Members of Congress wouldn't stand up to him and condemn his bigotry and just general lack of suitability for the presidency. And then we've learned more about Hillary Clinton. I personally believe that she's too corrupt to be the president of the United States. We just learned these things over time, but it became official after the conventions. And I said to myself, well, this is the last possible moment that somebody's going to be able to get into this race and offer the American people a better option. Again, I thought it would be someone else even then, but I did recognize it as the last possible moment.
All right, we're talking with Evan McMullin, who is an independent candidate running for president of the United States. And I guess one of the struggles that third-party candidates tend to have is with getting access to the debate and getting access to ballots so that we can have the option to be able to vote for you. Where does your campaign stand as of right now on both of those issues?
Well, ballot access is a challenge. I mean, we have a political system in this country that basically empowers only two parties right now, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And then other people who want to be involved in the process are basically blocked in many states from being involved, from participating. It's different in every state, but we're on the ballot now in 11 states. We'll be adding more. We've also registered as a write-in candidate in another 10 or 11 states, bringing the total to 21 or 22 states in which people will be able to cast a vote for me on November 8th. By the time we get to that date, the total number will be 40 to 45 states. So the vast majority of Americans will be able to cast a vote for me on that day if they choose. And in fact, we just got great news. Texas had been blocking us as a write-in candidate, even though we felt that we had, filed the right paperwork and whatnot. And we just learned, 20 minutes ago, that the state of Texas has confirmed to us that we will be a write-in candidate in Texas. So we're very happy about that.
All right. So stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to dig into some policy questions and talk a little bit about the things that you believe in. So stay tuned.
Great.
We're with Evan McMullin here on The Outlaws.
The Outlaws Radio Show on the FCB Radio Network.
And we're still here with Evan McMullin, independent candidate for President of the United States. And once again, we definitely want to thank you for coming on this show. There are some other candidates, one of your opponent who is ducking and dodging urban media outlets. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
So we got a question from social media, and this is a theme that I'm sure that you've heard often. Georgette asks, many people feel that voting for a third-party candidate is a wasted vote. So explain how it isn't. Why should someone vote for a third-party candidate when we've been told for years and years and years that you have to vote for either a Republican or a Democrat?
Well, I am so glad that you and your listener are asking that question because, as you point out, we've been sold that line, that lesser of two evils line, basically. It's the lesser of two evils philosophy about voting. It's that, hey, yeah, neither of these candidates are great. Neither of them are great leaders for America. But those are your two options, and you just got to pick the one that's, not as bad as the other one. I heard a preacher the other day say, if you're voting for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil. So I thought that was pretty compelling. I think that argument that we have to vote for either Republican or Democrats, or we've got to choose between just a select group of people because other people don't have a chance, I think that devalues the true value of a vote. In my view, our ability to choose our leaders and to cast a vote, that's sacred. I mean, but a lot of people on this planet don't have that power even. And the fact that we have it is a big, big deal. And the reality is, if we don't cast our vote for better leaders, we are never going to get those better leaders. And so my argument to people is that we need, and I include myself in this, we need to start casting our votes for better leaders that are going to unite this country, secure the country, and get the economy up and running again, reform the government. We've got to do this. And the other thing that's more more tactical is the following. In this election, it's possible that the race could be so close between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton that one state or two states could decide the outcome. And if that's the case, the voters in those states, there'll be some, swing states, the voters in those states will have the option to either hand the election to one of the two or to block both of them prevent both of them from achieving a majority in the Electoral College, which could then take the race to the House of Representatives. And then every state would get one vote in the House of Representatives. And so my argument is that if the race is that close and you're in one of those states, the outcome is going to decide the election, then vote for me because I believe I'm a better leader than both of them. Let's block them and we'll take it to the House and we'll have another chance at this. If the race is so far apart that it doesn't really matter, any outcome in any given state doesn't really matter because Hillary Clinton is winning by such a large margin or Donald Trump is winning by such a large margin. If that's the case, then then I urge the American people to vote their conscience. Vote again for who you think would really make the best leader and send a message to the system that you're not going to accept these corrupt, self-interested, bigoted leaders any longer.
Nice. Yes, definitely agree with that. So every year, over 1.2 million students drop out of high school. What fundamentals do you think are vital to reforming our failing education system?
Well, there's so much that needs to be done. I mean, it's not just about what we do to the educational system. I think we need to strengthen families too. That gets into, criminal justice reform. But with regard to schools alone, I'm a proponent of school choice, especially for people who, grow up in communities that are struggling financially. Sometimes they're forced to go to schools in those communities that are also not performing well. I think families and children in those communities ought to be given vouchers so that they can go to any school in that city, for example, and that'll cause the schools to have to compete for students. And I think that'll raise the standard of education in school districts, but it will also ensure that more students get a better education and they don't get caught in this cycle of less than excellent education and poverty, which I think is a real challenge, especially in some of our minority communities. So that's one thing. I believe in school choice. I think that's a really important policy change that I'd like to see. I'd like to see more broadly in the United States.
All right, we're talking with Evan McMullin, who's running for president of the United States. And along those lines, we have a lot of younger listeners, and the biggest issue facing us right now is student loan debt. As president, what would you do to address the massive cost of college education and the debt that a lot of people are getting as a result of it?
Well, a couple of things. And first of all, I'll say that I think I'm the only presidential candidate who still has student debt, and I have it from grad school. So for me, this is a personal issue.
Right.
When I finished grad school, I had a ton of student debt because I went to an expensive school, and the average interest rate on my student loans, my government student loans, was almost 8%. Which is super high, and it was much higher than what the market interest rate was. And so the first thing I think we need to do is we need to, the market rates need to be, or the interest rates need to be set by the market. So, there's no reason that, that I should be paying and that other people should be paying between 6 and 8% when market rates are way lower than that. The government is charging us at high rates when the economy has been using much lower rates. So I think the rates of the interest rates on student loans need to reflect market rates, and they need to be capped so that they can never go too high. For example, as high as 8%. Maybe they could go that high if the market rate was that, but it shouldn't go any higher than that, certainly. And the rate maybe should be capped even at a lower percentage than that. But the other thing that needs to happen is, see, what happens right now, and you probably lived this, is, you go to school and you get student loans from the government. The school gets those student loans. You education, hopefully, and then you go on and you go try to find a job. In this economy, you may or may not have success. Well, in terms of the school's interest, they've already got their money. So if you're out there and you can't find a job, and therefore you can't pay back your student loans, and then you default on your student loans or whatever the scenario may be, the school has no skin in the game. They got what they needed. And so what I would propose is that we need to restructure things so that the school bears some liability to that debt, so that if I graduate and I can't go find a job, I'm trying to find a job, but I can't find a job, and then I therefore can't pay my student loans. Well, that money should, the school, that should impact the school too. Why? Because if it does, then the school will have an interest in keeping the cost of education down, therefore their financial exposure is lower, and they'll have an interest in keeping the quality of the education they're offering students high. Again, because if they don't do that, they'll suffer some financial vulnerability themselves. Bottom line is schools just have to have more skin in the game. That'll keep costs down and the quality of education up, and I think that's what we need.
Okay, so to kind of keep along with the inner city community, as I'm sure you know, there are quite a few unique issues impacting the inner city and people of color in this country. What are your plans to spur any economic growth within the inner city and to fight poverty?
Well, a couple of things. One of them is, you hear conservatives talk a lot about overregulation, right? You often think of it, okay, well, this is somebody who wants big companies like General Electric or Apple to receive less regulation. But really, we've got a regulation problem in our communities where, some economic thinkers that I read, whose work I read, they talk about how, for example, in like the District of Columbia, you gotta go through 160 hours, or it's maybe more than that. Maybe it's 1,500 hours of training in order to be certified so that you can braid hair legally. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. So what that means is that people who would be entrepreneurs who want to go out there and start their own businesses, these can be, in this case, single mothers who are trying to make ends meet. They simply want to open up a small business to braid their friends' and neighbors' hair. They shouldn't have to jump through all this red tape to be able to do that. In fact, there's more red tape for people who want to open up a business like that, doing something with hair, than there is for people who want to get like a real estate license, which is, it just shouldn't be that way. And so the first thing is getting the government out of the way of entrepreneurs in these communities so that they can go out and start businesses and earn for themselves. That's one thing. Another thing is on the poverty front is the education side, and I already spoke about vouchers. I think that's important. Another thing is that I think President Johnson declared war on poverty in the 1960s, and at that time, 15% of the U.S. population lived below the poverty line. Guess how much it is now? 15%, it's just unacceptable that here we are now in 2016, and 15% of this country still lives in poverty. That's almost 50 million Americans. In a country as wealthy as ours, that just shouldn't be the case. But one of the problems we face is that our programs, our poverty programs, they're really designed to help people survive in poverty. They're not designed to get them out of poverty. And so I think we need to make changes so that our programs are better, work better in that way to get people out of poverty. So what does that mean? I think it means that we need to give states more power to customize anti-poverty programs. Right now, most of our anti-poverty programs are designed in Washington, D.C., and they're one-size-fits-all solutions for the entire country. That doesn't work because in some places you've got one set of problems, and in another place you got another set of problems. We need states who are closer to the people who are struggling to be able to say, okay, in our state, this is what the problem is, so we're going to design our anti-poverty program to address that. So that's one thing. We need more customizable programs done at the state, controlled at the state. The other thing I think we need to do is we need to reward people for work. So one idea that I like is this idea of a wage supplement. So what it means is, okay, let's say that you're working a minimum wage job, which isn't enough to survive on. And so what I would like to see is a program that supplements your hourly wage. So let's say you're making, $8 an hour, and that's not enough to live on. So maybe you get an additional, I don't know how much, maybe it's $3 to $5 plus on top of that for every hour you work from the government. So the more you work, the more money you get. And the more you work, I think, the more opportunities you'll have to, progress in your career, and then to lift out of poverty. So that's another thing I'd like to see. We also have a big, drug problem in this country, and we have been approaching it by just locking people up. I don't think that's the answer. I think that wrecks families and creates a whole host of other problems. I think we've got to instead focus on, people have drug problems. These are nonviolent crimes. We need to help people, break those habits so that they can have better opportunities economically and not lock them up and therefore make their children go without their parenting, which I think, again, has a bunch of problems that result from that. So anyway, those are some ideas I have.
All right. We'll be right back with one more segment with Evan McMullin running for president of the United States here on The Outlaws.
The Outlaws Radio Show on the FCB Radio Network.
And we're still here with Evan McMullin, independent candidate for president of the United States. And we're going to, I'm going to ask you, we've been getting a lot of questions on social media about your time at the CIA. People are fascinated by that. So is there anything that you can tell us about that time? I mean, that you can legally, tell us about your time at the CIA?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I could tell you what my job was, first of all. Officially, the official title is Operations Officer, and I worked in the part of the CIA that's called the National Clandestine Service. So what that means is that I ran covert operations against terrorist organizations and against other countries that are adversarial to us. And so I lived overseas undercover, and I ran those operations. So after 9/11, I spent time in all war zones and all hostile environments in the Middle East and South Asia, Central Asia, and North Africa. And, those were harrowing times. The country was, I don't know how old you are, but maybe some of your listeners are too young to remember these times, but maybe not. But those were times when the whole country was afraid. We were afraid that another big terrorist attack, maybe a dirty bomb, a nuclear bomb, something like that was going to happen. And that was the context of my time in the CIA, living overseas, working as hard as we could to figure out what the next attack was going to be and to prevent it. And I tell people, is it like the movies? Was it like the movies? And I tell people that it was better. It was more exciting and more intense than even the movies portray.
Wow.
I like that answer.
Yeah, definitely. So going along those lines, actually, on terrorism and things like that, what is your approach to fighting terrorism and dealing with ISIS and things like that? I know that's something that a lot of people are concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think we have to have a comprehensive strategy to defeat ISIS. We don't have that now in a way that I think is credible. I think we need a comprehensive strategy. What I think that strategy needs to include is, I think, first of all, there's a dictator that you've heard a lot about, I'm sure, Bashar al-Assad in Syria. He's carrying out mass atrocities against Syrian civilians. He's gassing them. He arrests his security services, arrests his political opposition, and people are being tortured and killed in mass in the most heinous, cruel ways you could imagine. And I've seen pictures that have come out of there, and it's the most terrible thing you could possibly imagine. But as he slaughters innocent Syrian civilians in mass, that creates these large refugee flows. Half of Syria's population have been forced from their homes. That's about 11 million people. Half of those people are children, and they're not being educated, so they're vulnerable to exploitation, especially the girls. They're also vulnerable to radicalization by the terrorists that are in the region. Also, this situation created by Bashar al-Assad helps created conditions wherein ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other groups can thrive. And so he's responsible for, in part, the fact that they've been able to expand so much in Syria and in Iraq. So we have to constrain him and prevent him from continuing to attack the Syrian people with our international partners. Then I think we need to step up airstrikes against ISIS. I think we need to be better about working with our partners on the ground. We've got the moderate Syrian opposition, we've got the Kurds, and we've got the Turks especially. The Turks have even said that they'll put their ground troops in if we will show them that we have a real comprehensive strategy and that we're committed to it. So that's what I think we need to do. We need to work more with friendly forces on the ground, giving them the training and weapons that they need, and we need to help out from the air, and we need to limit Bashar al-Assad's ability to continue to attack the Syrian people.
We're talking with Evan McMullin, independent candidate for president of the United States, and we're going to switch gears here a little bit. Jessica has a question for you on immigration.
So immigration always comes up in these debates, and Trump, I'm sorry. He always says, we're going to put up borders. He really doesn't give any solution. So this is like a 3-part question. What flaws do you see in our current immigration system? What changes do you want to implement to improve our current system? And what do you plan to do with the 11 million illegal immigrants that are here in the United States?
Okay, well, let me try to tackle that. If I leave something out, call me on it and remind me what it is, and I'll answer that too. But look, our immigration system has a lot of flaws. So, I'll mention some of them. there's a huge backlog. We don't process people quickly enough. We also don't enforce our laws. We also, I think, misprioritize who we bring to the United States. So let me share a couple of thoughts. I do think we've got to secure the border with Mexico. That's just a basic thing. We've got to do it. I do think we need to enforce our laws. We're a country of laws. We need to have good laws that should be enforced, and then we need to enforce them. I mean, that's important for our country that our laws be enforced. But with regard to the 11 million people, we shouldn't be in this situation in the first place, but we are, and they are here. And so I think it's unrealistic, and I also think it would do enormous damage to our country, both from a social perspective and from an economic perspective, if we en masse deported all these people. I think that people who are living here otherwise, they're otherwise obeying our laws and living peacefully, I think they should be put on a path towards a legal presence here. And I think, they're already working for the most part, and they're engaged. If they're obeying the law, I think they should be able to stay. If they're not obeying the law, then I think they should be sent home. I think that's fair. For some of these people, some of them just want to be here seasonally because, they do jobs that Americans won't do. For example, I was raised in Washington State, where we have a lot of farms and apple orchards and, berry farms and whatnot. And usually Mexicans will come up to pick those fruits, and they make very little, but for them it's a lot of money, and they go back to their families in Mexico, and it's a really good deal for them. And so we need that. Our farms, our farms depend on this labor, so it can be seasonal. Other people are here permanently, or they would like to stay permanently. We need to put them on a path. I think if somebody wants to be a citizen of this country, though, they should have to go through the normal process. I don't think that people who are here illegally should be on any kind of fast track to citizenship. I think they should have a chance to get it in line, essentially, and go through the process. But I do think we could probably make some reforms to that process for everyone so that, if we've decided somebody, is going to get citizenship, we could make it probably more efficient, but we could also make the whole system more efficient. For example, I also think we need to think about how we prioritize. For example, right now, there's a priority put on sort of extended family. So if you come over here with your immediate family, you can apply for extended family to come too. I think I understand that's okay in a perfect world, but the reality is, I think we should be putting priority on people coming here who have the best ideas in science and technology, who are going to come here and innovate and then create companies and jobs for Americans. I think we need to put more of an emphasis in immigration on that side of things too, on bringing, again, people from around the world with the best ideas. Our country has long been the place where people want to go. If you have a big idea and a big dream, you want to come to the United States because that's the best place to pursue it. We need to make sure that our immigration system reflects that priority and that the importance of innovation in our country.
We're talking with Evan McMullin, independent candidate for President of the United States. And the next question I want to ask you is, coming from the urban community, the Black community, religion is something that's very important to us. I'm a Christian, and I'm very I pay a lot of attention to religious liberty and freedom issues and things like that. They're something that matters to me. So where do you stand on issues of religious liberty and religious freedom?
Well, they're really important to me, and thanks for that question. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. So my family first came to the United States on my dad's side in the 1600s. They came to what we now call Massachusetts. And they came because they were looking for religious liberty and for economic opportunity. And so it's in my blood. But then 200 years later, they joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon church, and that's the church that I belong to. And they were persecuted as a result of that. The government wanted to exterminate them, wanted to kill them off, and did kill some of them. And so they moved across the country. They trekked across the plains and made their way to Utah and then settled there. That's on my dad's side. On my mom's side, her family came from Poland after World War II. They had escaped the Nazis, and eventually they made their way to the United States and settled in Philly. And so, again, they were looking for religious freedom and religious liberty, but it's just in my blood, and I think it's just such a basic part of this country and what this country is all about. And I think our religious liberties, frankly, are under threat right now. And I think people of all faiths, of all different kinds of Christian faiths, but also of other faiths, people of the Jewish faith, Muslims, and others need to come together at this moment in time so that we, make sure that our religious liberties are protected.
All right, we're talking with Evan McMullin, running for President of the United States, and he has a question for you.
So, obviously, we're going to switch topics here a little bit. Obviously, in the news, there's been a lot of turmoil and issues between the police and people of color. This is kind of like a two-part question. What do you think can be done to both protect the lives and civil liberties of citizens while also protecting the lives of police officers? The second question is, along those lines, do you support the mandatory body cams for all officers for their safety and the public's?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me answer the second question first, because that's the shorter one. Yes, I do support that. I think body cameras are keep everybody protected, and we ought to make that the norm. As far as what else can be done, look, I think it starts with leadership. It starts with the tone of our leaders. This is something I spoke about a couple of weeks ago on a television show. But look, we've got Donald Trump right now fomenting discord between religions and between different races. And I have seen what Mitt Romney called trickle down racism in our country as a result of that. And it's pretty scary. I mean, people do take their cues from leadership. And I believe that Donald Trump is creating a racist environment in this country that is only going to make the problems that you just mentioned more difficult, and only spread them and make them more present in our communities. And that's why that's one of the reasons, there are many, but that's one of the reasons I'm so opposed to his candidacy. So what to do about it? What I think is we need a leader who's going to unify us, who's going to help build peace between different communities and between our law enforcement officers and the African-American community and other minority communities. What are some specific things that need to be done? I think the body cameras are really helpful, but I also think there needs to be more training with the police. I think that most police officers truly want to serve the people, and they risk their lives to do it. And I think that's the vast majority of them do that. But in any industry, there are bad apples and people who don't have the best interests of the country or their community in mind. And so, anyway, I think training is really important, especially in de-escalation. I think that Dallas, there's the police chief in Dallas, an African-American officer there. He's been very effective in training his officers on de-escalation, which I think is really important. I think we should take the lessons learned in Dallas and apply them elsewhere in the country where we can. I also think that, strengthening community engagement between police officers and the community, members of the community, is important too. So there's some level of understanding. And I think a lot of that happens already, but I think clearly we need to do more of that. But those are some of the things I think about. I'm sure there are other ideas out there, but I think it does start with leadership.
All right. So last week we had Emmy-nominated Andrea Vecchio on our show. She just recently wrote a book called Live Your Playlist. It basically says that your music playlist is how you express yourself and show who you are. So on your iPod or your iPhone right now, what's on your playlist and what kind of music do you like to listen to?
Well, my music tastes are really eclectic. Yeah, so they're not what I think people are going to expect, but I'm pulling up my playlist right now so I can name some of them.
I was going to say, let's hear some of these examples.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to pull up my most played list. But I grew up in Seattle, and at the time when I was growing up in Seattle, grunge was the big thing.
Nirvana.
So I grew up listening to Nirvana and going to Nirvana shows and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, and then other sort of punk artists that you probably, that most people probably haven't heard of.
Well, you know what? As the resident token white guy here, I will vouch for the fact that I've heard of most of everybody you just named, and I just got really jealous when you told me that you went to a Nirvana show, because I love Nirvana. They're one of my favorite grunge rock bands.
Well, that's awesome. I was back home in Seattle a couple months ago. They still play Nirvana on the radio there. Like, you can't, if you drive somewhere for half an hour and sort of roam around on the stations, you will hear multiple Nirvana songs. So it's pretty cool. But all right, now I'm now looking at my top 25 most played songs.
All right, let's hear it.
And so I'm going to read you the artists, okay? So it's Cascade, Coldplay, Major Lazer, Shiny Toy Guns, Nico and Vinz, Neon Indian, Death Cab for Cutie, Beck, what else? Cherub, and more Cascade. So
that's a pretty diverse list for
definitely
a young 40-year-old man like yourself.
Yes, very eclectic.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so as we wrap this thing up, let everybody know. So for people, we live in Ohio. If people wanted to vote for you, what would they do? How would they do it? Are you what's the process? How would they vote for you here if they wanted to?
Well, I'm going to be registered or I already am. I'm not sure if I already am or will be yet. It's moving so quickly, but we will be registered as a write-in candidate in Ohio. So in fact, I think we already are. So if you want to vote for me, all you got to do is learn how to spell my name. That's McMullin, not E-N. And then you just write it on the ballot. Instead of checking a box for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, you just write my name on that line, and you have just counted or registered a vote for me that will be counted.
All right, and let everybody know how to get in contact with you on social media, your website. If people want to send some money, where do they do that, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And all of that's super important. We are a grassroots campaign. We're not supported by, big money or anything like that. We're supported by incredible people across this country who are chipping in to help us out. And it's just been incredible to see. But you can do all that at evanmcmullin.com. Sign up to volunteer. We've got amazing volunteers, as I said, across the country. Join them. Join this cause. This is not only for this election. We're building something that will go beyond this election. I firmly believe that it's time for a new generation of leadership in this country. Leadership that honors individual liberties and that also is tolerant and inclusive of people of different backgrounds. That's what we need in this country. If you go to evanmcmullin.com, you can donate and volunteer and get involved in this cause.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. It's been an honor. And thank you again.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope we get to do this again.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you.
Bye-bye. Take care.